What happens when the people sworn to uphold the law create the crime? Or when the people sworn to protect us become the architects of crime? When law enforcement stops catching criminals and starts creating them? Welcome to Entrapped, the podcast that dives into one of the most controversial corners of American justice, government entrapment. This is Entrapped with Tom Hamner.
What role would you say that the government played in shaping this event and what they did on that day to escalate the event? You've covered a lot of the things of your experience. Now, let me hear your opinion as to after you left and you got to start processing things. What is it that you feel could be done differently with their response, and how has that impacted you and your life and your career and your relationships with your friends and neighbors, and how has it impacted you in the way that you look at your freedoms now?
Well, I guess the best way is to look back how I was feeling the very next day. So the very next day, I did a report through what they call Ninja Reporter, and I even said on there, I felt like we walked into the trap that day. But
Yeah,
having said that, I never thought I'd ever get arrested. I knew I didn't do anything wrong. I was not worried. Matter of fact, I had enough evidence. I believe that if the evidence would have been brought forward, I could have even put Trump back in the White House. I wanted to bring in evidence into the courtroom they wouldn't allow me to do. I want to put a skiff in place,
that's
not
right.
necessarily even bring classified information in, and they forbidden me for even doing that and calling my witnesses. So, because they did that, the judge basically said because they couldn't have my witnesses, then they couldn't put me in a form of a conspiracy. So it had to be people that would directly associate with me that could be as a witness. Well, she didn't even follow her protocols because all the people that testified weren't even there, weren't even part of where I was at or anything else. Just the standard police with normal talking points that they normally bring onto the stage, which has nothing to do with you or your location or you even being there. You see what I'm saying? So she didn't even
Yeah,
follow her proceedings. But it also didn't put me in the conspiracy part of it, and I called them out on the 1512. I said, you can't use the 1512 because that was used for Enron as paperwork and it has to be used as written. So then the Supreme Court comes back and says, yep, it has to be used as written. So unless you use paperwork to interfere with an investigation, you can't use it. And then they overturn the Chevron doctrine, which means all the laws that are in play right now by the three-letter agencies that have been interpreted are now up for rebuttal and to go before the Supreme Court. You see what I'm saying? So right
yes,
now, all these agencies are in double jeopardy if they double down on January 6th and everything else and try to use these laws or whatever it is that they're using to try to convict us. It's like they got me on picketing and parading. Those are things that are fundamentally supported under the Constitution. So how can that even be allowed as a law? Like the Constitution, any law that violates the Constitution is null and void. So the thing is,
that's
they
right.
weren't even following constitutional principles.
No,
But
they
until
weren't.
we get back to the Constitution, it's not going to fix anything because we're operating
It's
under
true.
British rule. But what we need to do, and I told every January 6er, do not live in fear. Do not worry about outcomes. Don't try to plea bargain. Don't play their games. Stand on your principles, your God given principles, and in the end, you'll be justified. And if you'd have done that rather than trying to navigate outcomes, you'd have been far better off. However, not everyone did that. And so I got a lot of hate from a lot of January 6ers when I brought that up because they felt like they're responsible for the rest of us getting in trouble because they plea bargained. I didn't say you did it intentionally. I didn't say you did it because you didn't have family involved. You made your own decisions. I'm just saying as an issue of principles, whether it's January 6th or any other case, if we start fighting these things and upholding our constitutional rights, then these not well, I shouldn't say legislators, but I should say these judges who are legislating from the bench can't get away with the things they're doing and set up case law, which has prosecuted all of us in one way or another through different policies and principles that they have in order to browbeat us and hold us hostage. So And let me
That's
explain
true.
a little bit how the law should work and how the law is working, because it's based upon biblical principles. Say you have a stop sign. The stop sign is there for one reason only. When there's a damaged party, they know who to blame it on. Okay, what they've done is twisted the law, so now if you're on a stop sign, the officer can give you a ticket. It was never intended to give you a ticket. This is what the Pharisees and Sadducees did during the biblical times, is to use the law of the browbeaters rather than, if there's a damaged party, who to blame it on. And so what we've
Right.
done is made these laws to basically allow each and every one of us, and they say the average person commits a felony every week or two. That's a horrible
Yes.
situation. You could be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they can literally destroy your life. But they like doing that because once they destroy your life and they get you any kind of felony, what do? They take away your guns. What's the very
Yep.
thing that makes us
Power and
free
control.
from the rest of the world is our ability to bear arms. The reason why, the Japanese wouldn't, Takamoto even said, we would not, enter into the United States, because the day we would do that, there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. The very thing that keeps us free is our guns. And guns weren't intended for hunting, they were intended to hold government responsible. And you got to
Yeah.
understand some of the things I do.
Because
I
we
build
can use
guns.
traps, we can use snares, we can use bows and arrows to kill and eat, and we know how to plant seeds and grow food, but we don't need a gun to do all that stuff. But what we do need a gun for is exactly what you said. That gun will ensure that the government doesn't just trample all over us and destroy what it is that are our inalienable rights that were given to us not by man but by God.
And see, and I live off the grid. I'm self sufficient. I build explosives. I mean, I build high powered weapons, build them for the Defense Department. Literally, if they were to try to come up here, they wouldn't have left the property alive. None of them. But see,
Yeah.
that's the equal and opposite threat. I don't care what kind of force would come here; they would be stopped. Now, am I willing to, stand before those who make these false accusations and go to court willingly? Absolutely. I self
Yep.
surrendered. I did all those things. It's not like I'm running from the law, because I live by principles, but I'm also not going to allow them to bully me. And here's the thing, and we had this happen when we were raided by the BATF and all the rest of the 3 other agencies, because we were made in lower receivers, which were allowed to make by law. But they tried to raid us and try to stop us from doing so, which we won in our proceedings. But they basically came in and tried to take over the building. The local sheriff here at that time called down to the police station, had us, not me, but the gentleman I'm referring to, um, build lower receivers, and I would help him with it. So he surrendered to the local sheriff's department, and then they went in and raided the place. And then they had people, all their neighbors were looking out the windows. These 3 other agencies were pointing guns at them. It wouldn't have ended very well. The people were like ready to start aiming back at them. So
Right.
it was handled pretty well within the state of Montana, because they know that everyone has a gun and no one's going to put up with people coming in and just doing things haphazardly. There needs to be some kind of accountability. And so, as far as Montanans go, we won't put up with these agencies coming in and doing the things that they would normally try to do. And why is that important? So, if all of us start standing on our principles, not because we're an organization, not because we're part of a militia, even though that's a constitutional principle, and a militia is basically defend our homeland. It wasn't just a group or a crazy a group of people, which how they've labeled everything to be, but individuals who are willing to stand up to defend each and every one of our liberties. So if we see an organization come in, whether it be the BATF, ATF, or whoever it may be surrounding us, we surround them. We make sure their paperwork's in order, make sure they're doing things correctly. We just don't let them kick our doors in and start using flashbangs and start hurting people. We surround them. And when we surround them, then we win. And so if we start living by those principles and holding these agencies accountable, because we're the ones that run Congress, we're the ones that run the purse strings of this country. It's not Congress that does it. If all of us stand up tomorrow and said we're not going to pay our taxes, we'd get our country back. but people are
That's true.
still fearful and afraid of the government. So therefore, we have to hire someone. We got to hire police to police things. We got to hire this person to do it because we're not willing to stand up ourselves. When we become proactive in maintaining our constitutional rights, then we'll start gaining our liberties and our freedoms back. And we just need to stand together. We do it the right way, and we need to know how to do it in a logical way, not just someone who's crazy is swinging a gun around. That's not how you do things. You show up in
That's not
masses.
smart.
You say, what paperwork do you have? Do you have your paperwork in order? What did this person actually do? You're not going to just, kick the door in and terrorize a bunch of individuals in the home. You know, things need to be done
That's what
in
they
a
did after January 6th, and they did it across the nation. It was unfortunate. And that brings me up to this next question of, you know, you've heard the term domestic extremist, insurrection, all of these all of these key hot words. Um, to you, what does the term domestic extremist mean to you? And do you believe that it was applied fairly to anybody from January 6th?
well, maybe we need to go back to how words became the words that they are today. I mean, look at the JFK assassination and what happened there. Everyone that realized that our CIA was involved, they basically called us conspiracy theorists. Well, now we find out our CIA was involved in it, and that was removing
Yeah.
a president. So the problem is these three-letter agencies come up with their own words and make a determination, and the Mockingbird media. And the reason why I call it Mockingbird media because all the media gets their talking points from the CIA at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they all say the same things, and it's a form of brainwashing. That's how you control the public. So that's
Yep,
why Trump has
that's
always
true.
gone on the news and he keeps saying, the media is a problem. They're the enemy of the people, and they're lying to us, and that's how they've maintained their control. See, I believe we're dealing with a spiritual battle. I believe we're dealing with principalities and powers from the heavenly realms. I believe we're dealing with fallen angels that have not left. I believe they've corrupted mankind to use their powers to enslave us. And I believe we're in very precarious times, but we're going to win. I believe we're standing at the edge of the promised land. And if we're willing to stand up and fight and not run like Israel did because you feel like you're grasshoppers compared to the giants, then we're not going to receive the blessings. I even said that when I went to DC. I felt like David versus Goliath. God laid it on my heart to get people there, and they used it in my court proceeding to say I was going to do something because I said those words. So I find it very funny how God leads you in certain directions. And I've always found myself to be a digital soldier behind the scenes, spreading the truth because I've been in this battle for a very long time, exposing the fraud and corruption within government. I never for 1 second ever thought I'd be on the front line, but I couldn't have said the things
That's
I
what
said,
God
or
does with his guardian angels is he puts them where they can do the most work and be the biggest of benefits. So that I think is the role that he had given you, and you are continuing in that role.
yeah, and just being bold and
You,
standing up.
yeah, yeah, and that's what the government, any government, I don't care if it's our government or a government in another country, no government likes the people to stand up to them because that means that they have no control. But that's how this country was designed. The people have the power, and you know, we get into what is this balance, um, and how do we view it of the civil liberties, and how it versus the national security. So, in your view, what is your view of with the balance of civil liberties versus the national security in the aftermath of January 6th?
Well, I don't know. I mean, for me, I would say we get caught up in what we call civil liberties, and that term has been used in so many different ways to mean so many things to different people. I don't think it has any meaning anymore. I would say our God-given rights and principles because our founding
Yes,
fathers based it upon that. Because otherwise, you could say, well,
exactly.
I should be a different sex, I should be this. And we get into all these things that it was never meant to be. So the term has been so badly used that I don't know if I could even want to rephrase it that way, but just living by your principles, living by those things you believe are
Right.
morally true and correct is how I would view how to move forward through these precarious times that we're in, and not being worried about whether you know the Constitution, not being worried whether you know the laws and how to navigate
Yes,
through it,
sir.
but living by your principles, because in the end the Constitution represents godly principles, and in the end you'll be justified through your actions. You just got to live by those principles. I always say you're no better or no worse a person than the principles by which you govern your life by. So if we govern our life by those principles, in the end we'll be justified. It's just like the Pharisees, Sadducees. They would try to live their lives by the law, or at least appear to live their lives by the law, rather than living by the principles of the law. And I'll give you an example how that works. I mean, so you had Rahab the prostitute. She lied and hid the spies, and God accredited her as righteousness. So they said, well, that violates the Ten Commandments. No, because she did it because it was a condition of her heart. She knew if she gave them up, she'd be self-righteous. So sometimes in law we have duality. Duality means there is no correct answer that seems to be right other than a moral answer, because it's like you're driving down the road. You see someone pull out in front of you, you swerve off the road. Theoretically, you could be in trouble for swerving off the road rather than hitting that person and possibly killing him. I would,
Right.
evade the situation rather than creating an accident. But in doing so, I could get myself hurt, or I could tumble off the road, and that my insurance wouldn't cover it, or whatever the case may be. It's a catch-22 you run into. But do you live by principles, or do you live by other values that are monetarily driven to put you in a higher situation, even if that hurts or costs someone their life? That means you can be bought and sold. So the problem is we can't go down that path. We don't want to think that way. So now here's another example. Here's a man, David, who's after God's own heart. He wanted to marry Bathsheba, but he couldn't. So he sent her husband into battle. He got killed so he could marry her. And then he says, well, I didn't do anything wrong, God. And God said, I'm going to hold you accountable because it was a condition of your heart. So if we live by our heart conditions and do what's right, in the end we'll be justified. And like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they even said that God is able to rescue them. But even if he does not, we will not bow the knee to Baal. We can't force God into a situation to show up, but we can allow him to show up because we do it out of a free will, and we do it because we're doing it with the right motives in our heart. So now, whether you believe there's a plan in place, like I do, that cues there, or whether you believe God's in control, it shouldn't diminish whether you have principles by which you govern your life by to do the right thing. Because if you believe in God and you don't believe in a plan, then you believe that God will work out the outcome. So why are you worried? If you believe there's a plan and man has his hand in it, you know that God is also working with man because he's setting up a plan to rein in this evil. And I really believe that until man reins in the evil, the Lord can't return, and we can't have. So we're originally in the garden. We were given fiduciary responsibility over it. Because we gave that fiduciary responsibility up to Satan, he's now the God of this world. And until we
That's right.
regain that fiduciary responsibility, we are never going to see the Lord show up or do the things he needs to do because he's expecting us to do it. Will he fight with us? Absolutely. Is he going to do it for us, like rapture us out of here and all the things that Christians believe? No, that's not going to happen.
No, no,
So we need to show up first, and then God will do the
that's right.
rest, and that's what's important.
That is important. We all know that January 6th, the event was used politically as a weapon. Um, a narrative was created so that it could be weaponized right from the gate. They probably had this all planned out before it started. And in your view, what do you think the biggest untold story about January 6th might be?
Well, actually, I got a bunch of them. But let me get into this one first. I think it's paramount of importance. I believe
Sure.
that Trump, the White Hats, knew that January 6th was going to be a setup. So you can even hear General McInerney talk about it. So they knew they
Hmm.
were setting us up, but while they were setting us up, they were being set up too.
That's
Unfortunately, we
right.
were all pawns in their game. So when that happened, they told Nancy Pelosi and all that the Capitol's being overrun. There's nobody there yet. and they whisked them out of the building. Well, in doing so, they had agents walk in there, grab their laptops and everything else. So what they did is recover the evidence of the fraud of January 6th. So they
Yeah,
had to have the inside information. Now we have everything we need to expose the deep state through the NSA. So, but the problem is the NSA is forbidden from eavesdropping on Americans and bringing that information forward into our court systems.
that's
So,
right.
until you can prove foreign interference in the election and all that, there is no way we can bring the records forward. And you got to understand, I swore the oath under General Flynn because he asked us to freely do so, as digital soldiers. And General Flynn was in charge of the NSA. And so he
That's
has
right.
all the information. So it's not if,
He's
it's
got
not
all the dirt.
it's just when. He knows where the bodies are buried. There's a big meaning to all that. So I really
Yes, sir.
believe that at some point it's going to come forward. I really believe this would have things. I believe there were several times Trump could have come back. If we would have stood up as January 6ers, I believe 2 years into this whole operation could have come to a halt if everyone would have stood and fight. But because we didn't and we bring the information forward, it has to be slowly rolled out. So now we're in a long extended period. It's like double overtime. We're going into the
That's
last
true.
inning of a football game. You know what I'm saying? So this has all been
Yes,
extended because we failed to do our due diligence and our responsibility to stand up and fight. Now, some of us did fight, but not all of us did. And we need to learn
that's
from
right.
this so this doesn't happen again. We need to show up in masses and we need to surround them. I mean, the bottom line is we go to court, whether it's in DC or whatever. Can you imagine millions of us showing up around the courtroom holding these judges accountable? They wouldn't know what to do. The
No,
problem
they would
is they
not.
do it behind closed doors. It's not videotaped so the public can see the proceedings. They try to keep all this information secret. So they basically, in almost every January 6th case, they basically made it so that people can't see the minutes of what happened that day. They shut it off. Now, whether those people are acting as witnesses for the deep state, which if you're a traitor and you're going to betray people, I have a real problem with you. Other times they just hid it from the public because there was evidence in there they didn't want the next trial to see. But just because they hid the evidence doesn't mean that person in that court proceeding did anything wrong. So we got to not be judgmental about other January 6th at this point. There's too much infighting right now. What we need to do is
That's
focus
true.
on our true enemy. And I believe, the military at some point, and I pray that Trump is going to release all the records from all the J6ers so that they know what happened in each case, so they know who the traitors are from the ones who weren't. Because some people are painted as traitors that aren't traitors at all. And this is how the deep state
Yes,
operates. It just causes division and fighting amongst all of us, and it's very unfortunate. And especially for those that have raised money for other people, it even got worse for them. They got beat up really bad, even though they're helping other January 6ers raising money online. The people are expecting more money. People want all their lawyers paid for. And I told everyone, I said, we should have never have hired a bunch of lawyers. What we should have done is we should have a couple lawyers behind the scenes overlooking all the cases, hire, court appointed attorneys and instruct them as to what to do. Because that's what I did. I instructed my attorney what to do. And if he didn't like it, I didn't care. I told him, this is what you're doing. And this is how we're proceeding. If we would have done that and had good counsel in the background, we wouldn't have cost a bunch of money. We could have compiled all the information from every case. And in doing so, we could have basically entrapped the government in their own disinformation campaign and exposed it to the world.
that was perfect. Entrapped the government. I like the way that you said that because the government did exactly that to all of us. We
Correct.
were entrapped. When our government is out of control because we the people have given it so much, this is what happens. They use the laws and they create the criminals through crimes. And this is what an entrapment looks like. January 6th was the biggest hoax ever. And it has really shaped a national memory of that day, both by all of the January Sixers and the national media. And when you look at the media, we're thugs, we're insurrectionists, we're a threat to democracy, even though this isn't a democracy. Um, and so it's very unfortunate that we can't trust those people that you and I years ago, sitting at the dinner table, we would watch 60 Minutes and we would think that we were getting good information. And maybe back then we were. But I don't think that's the same today. So it's up to us to do these things that we're doing right now and talk about what the outcomes were, what the experiences are, and what it is to move forward with this country so that we understand our Constitution, that beautiful writing that the founding fathers put together for us. And we have to defend that. We have to defend that with knowledge. We have to defend that with our lives. And we have to defend that with every ounce of our spirit, soul, and heart. And we give it up to God in order to do that. Um, what message would you want the people that are listening to this podcast? What would you want them to walk away with after hearing your story, Hank?
Well, there's a lot of things, but the two things that I can point out right now that's very important and where we're at the moment. First of all, we have the right to overthrow any illegitimate government. That was written in the Constitution.
Yes,
Um,
it was.
and so we have that ability. So to paint the narrative that we can't overthrow a government, that is incorrect because it's governed by we the people. That's the first narrative. Second of all, anytime we're dealing with war and we're in war and we're running a military operation, the first engagement in a military operation is always use your enemy's weapons against themselves. So we need to turn the tables in the judicial system that they're using against us on them. And that's why if we would have organized in the beginning, we could have done just that. We could have turned the tables, we could have exposed the fraud to the world, and people would have seen it. But because of the way they did it behind closed doors, nobody knew. And so the problem that most Americans face right now, and I want to go back to one thing I always say that's hugely important. And I said, I love the day when we had slaves. I said, in the days we had slaves, that was a monumental time because at least a slave knew he was a slave. The problem with America right now is we've all been enslaved and we don't know it. That's really the issue
Exactly.
that's at play. And it has nothing to do with color. Slavery has been going on for the beginning of time. Every nation has been enslaved. Every race of people has been enslaved. And when we freed the slaves in America, it wasn't really about freeing the slaves. It was about giving power to the government. Because let me go back to how we got to this position, because this is the fundamentals of law. And if you don't understand how we got here, how are you going to fix it? So originally, slaves came to America from Africa. They were enslaved by their own people. They were brought here. And as a fiduciary responsibility, we paid for those people to be removed from slavery from their country, brought here, and they were to work as servants for a period of 2 years to pay back their debt, and then they're to be released. But the morality of people is some people didn't want to let them out of their contracts, number one. And number two, the first slave owner in America was actually a black man. So here's how that happened. So a black man who was a slave ended up becoming free. He ended up starting his own plantation. And by starting his own plantation, he got a bunch of black people from Africa to work for him as slaves. And one of these slaves, I don't know if he was mistreated or what. I don't know the whole details of the incident. But anyhow, he created a whole bunch of damage for the plantation owner. And when the slave was caught, he went before the judge, and the judge ordered him to be slave for the rest of his life. So the first slave owner in America was actually a black man. But here's what's really bad: we gave the government authority to choose who can be enslaved. That's what we did.
That's right.
And so nothing has changed. All we did was change the dynamics of race and color and put government in control of it to browbeat all of us and to basically have us live in fear because we're facing off against David and Goliath. Oh, you can't take on Goliath. I'm the type of guy, I'll take on Goliath. I don't care. When all of the people listening to me and all the people in America recognize that and we're willing to stand up against Goliath and we don't care anymore, that's when we win. And that's the dynamics that needs to be taught. Those are principles that need to be looked at. We live by our principles. We do not worry about the outcomes or what the government can do to us. All we care about is living our life according to how God intended it to be. And by holding those principles dear, we can hold a government accountable because people will stand beside us shoulder to shoulder and come together. But because we haven't fought and we haven't learned to fight together as a team, we end up losing all the time if people run in fear. And all the January 6ers are still facing that to this day. When we were charged, everyone that associated with it, even family members, disassociated with us because we assume that if the government charges you with something, you must have done something wrong. It's like the holy of holies. They couldn't have charged you unless there was some real tangible bit of information, when really it's just a
That's
bully
true.
pulpit. And I've told people
Yeah.
over and over, I have a bumper sticker on my vehicle. I said, you know the difference between government and mafia? Size. That's it.
True. So it sounds like we went from slavery to being enslaved, and now we've been entrapped.
Correct.
So we have we have a lot to learn. We have a lot of people to wake up still, and we have a lot of information to get out there. Hank, it's been an incredible conversation. Your story is absolutely amazing. Do you have any Give, Send, Go, or Cash App or Venmo information that you can share with us? Um, we'd like to make sure that anybody that wants to support you or follow you know who you are, know how to reach out to you to give a donation or support you, however that looks. And if there's any nonprofit organizations or anything, we'd like you to go ahead and announce that now. So your Give, Send, Go, if you have one, Cash App or Venmo.
I
We'll
have
also
a
go ahead and want you to send that over to us so we can post it on the podcast.
Yeah, I have a Venmo, Cash App. I also have a crypto account if people want to do it anonymously. But I've never asked for money. I probably the whole time I've been doing this, I've had local people give me money. I probably had maybe $1,000 that people have given me, but I've never asked for it. I've never said a give, send, go up. I've never done any of that. I've basically been helping other January Sixers navigate through this. But the hardest part for me right now, and this is, I think, the biggest struggle was not whether I went to jail. The hardest part for me was being on the outside, and I've had to shut down my business 4 different times, close down all my companies, and have to restart them again. The unknowing, the insecurity of not knowing how to move forward has been the hardest challenge for me because I have debts, I have obligations, trying to pay them, do
Yes,
my due
sir.
diligence, and it's been very, very difficult to do that. But I've had to put myself in a position where I could exit the situation in such a way that if I couldn't pay my debts, it's not because I didn't try, it's because I was locked up or because of this.
That's
Um,
true.
so it was hard navigating that. And so for me, getting started again has been very difficult. I have to get inventory back in my appliance shop so I can sell appliances, get back the word out because they shut down all my phone numbers I had like 8 numbers and they shut them all down except for one. The only one that wasn't in my name, it was in my dad's name. But they tried to pretty much put me out of business, is what they've tried to do. But I've never asked for money. I've been helping others, and I never thought I'd actually go to jail. But then when I did go to jail, I only spent 17 days in jail, which is cute. And the first time I was arrested, I was in jail on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And when I was pardoned, I was on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is also painted on the side of my building. So you can say it's God providence, coincidence, or a plan. But anyhow, it's just amazing
Well,
the journey I've been on.
it is amazing. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to announce your name, Hank Muntzer. Thank you from Dillon, Montana. We're going to put out his information. So if you want to follow Hank, you want to get involved with Hank, maybe you have a mine and you want to know whether or not there's some good stuff in there, this is the guy to contact. So whatever that looks like, get a hold of Hank Muntzer out of Dillon, Montana, and get involved, people. I don't care if you're from the East or West Coast or where you're from, we need to stand united. We are Americans, and this is our country. It does not belong to the politicians, it belongs to us. I don't ever want to hear this, which is the sound of handcuffs on my wrist again, unless I'm doing a podcast. This is Tom Hamner signing off. Another great episode of Entrapped.